of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And now again, it's an honor and a privilege to be with you, Alex, and to listen to your teaching. And as we all know, we all serve and teach and share in different ways and in different positions. So I just want to encourage you all that it is the right thing to do to share this technology, because for the most part, there aren't many who are going to discover it on their own. So it's up to us to open a new dimension, and these systems will support us in our work as well. So thank you, Alex, for joining us today, and please feel free to go right into it.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I'd just like to add one more thing before we get into it, and that is that these presentations, although they're public, that they are part of the Keshe Foundation, and there is no pressure to put them on YouTube. So, however it gets on YouTube, please be advised that you're doing that of your own volition. YouTube has announced some kind of restrictions, and I think we're all aware of those. So please take this under advisement and understand that these are the conditions for today in our tiny little perfect universe. And I want to welcome all the representatives of the various TV networks in the Keshe Foundation. So this is, yes, a North American team meeting, but we have representation from the vast international community. And we are very grateful and honored to be able to be allowed to make these presentations. One of the things that I'm very happy about is that we're starting to see the fruit growing on the trees. And there's no finer example than in Brazil. And the powerful team that is working down there, being led by Rafael. And when I say powerful team, I think it's in the thousands. So that is a shining light to guide us. It is not the largest team, but it is working under very difficult conditions, and the success is astounding, and it all comes from the teaching. As such, the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute would like to make this presentation on plasma science. The classes are known as Basic Knowing, and the subject today is biology. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It's October the 9th, 2021. And this is the presentation of the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. As you can see, that includes, of course, Canada, US, and Mexico. And the North American schedule, as you can see, is in what we call Basic Knowing. Now, how is the basic knowing different from the basic teaching? So we had to learn about basic concepts. So there are terminologies and concepts that we had to become familiar with. Every kind of vocation has its own lingo. So even rap stars have their own lingo. So we have our own lingo. Just the difference is that our lingo is not fashionable. Our lingo is scientific. And once we learned that lingo, then we could get into a little bit more intermediate teaching for those who wanted to know. And then we moved into advanced teaching. And that basic teaching was the first set of about 21 classes. Then we got into basic understanding. So now we want to see, what is this basic knowledge of the plasma science and how is it working? And we went through a whole host of things that we're familiar with. And the reason we did this was because there are thousands and thousands of hours in our archives, and we have thousands of people who are totally unaware. And as knowledgeable as we are always struggling to express ourselves in such a way that newcomers can understand. And it's very important to be a teacher is you have to understand it yourself. And so we went on a course of understanding, basic still understanding, and we had intermediate understanding and advanced understanding. When we completed that package, now we run into a real dilemma because the Keshe Foundation has been moving ahead extremely rapidly. So things haven't been standing still. In fact, we have been standing still. And now that we're in the 21st month of our pandemic situation, we're seeing the fallout that is coming from the effects of, shall we say, putting on the brakes. But there has been no putting on the brakes. Things are moving ahead and newcomers are still coming. And this is a real challenge. How do we convey to the newcomers this information in such a manner that it makes sense to them? And do we have the time to go through the thousands of hours of teaching? And so I've been going through a whole series here of discussing known subjects of academia. And what we want to find out is to understand what is the difference between the plasma science and the conventional science. And the reason this has become quite important is because we've had an inability to communicate with the youth. And it's not entirely our problem. It is our problem in terms of having to deal with it, but it's not our problem in terms of having created it. The educational system that we have has created it, the social structure that we have, the social pressure, and of course, the social media. And this media has become a substitute for education. So it becomes quite an interesting challenge. How come I probably have gone through an enormous amount of education in the last 6 years, and I find that our youth has not in that same time period. And they've had the same access that I have had. And so it started at a point where it wasn't very proficient with the computer presentations, but in this period of time, I've gotten a lot better. And you keep doing things, you get better. And this is the whole point. All of us need to keep doing these things to get better. And we can review it and review it and review it. And every time we look at it, it's like looking in the mirror day after day after day, and you see the change. So these are the things we want to emphasize. What are the changes? And when we see that the changes are, then we can know where to go. And what we want to do is we want to cross that bridge. We want to cross it quickly, effectively, and totally, because our system is broken. And that's what we're going to review. So we've reviewed physics, chemistry, and botany. And when we left off with botany, it was a very interesting subject. Had to do a lot with classification. And now we found that there were things missing. So today we're just going to have a look at biology. So please remember that we are looking at the long term. How do we convey this information to the new students? Each and every one of us can do this in our own way. We don't have to be in class. Some of us should be in class to teach. We have tremendous skills. In this audience today are some phenomenal talents. And so we try and arm them as much as we can. And they are also self-sufficient to be able to do the same thing. So I'm going on and on this because, you know what, we have already crossed the bridge. It's just a matter of looking at the bridge on the other side and saying, hey guys, it's time to cross over. So there's a new word in the vernacular, hesitancy. So we are knowledge hesitant. We started with terminology. Magnetical gravitational was the basis. And we discovered that in physics, when we break down the atom, that we now also have a monatomic structure. We have an atomic structure and a monatomic structure. And we discovered products like nano and GANs. And we seen that there are different energy states. And the words that are coming out in the next couple of weeks that we're going to focus on is what we call a gradient charge. And this is the dynamism that kind of is the backbone of everything. And we don't know where that comes from. So we have these various subjects that we're looking at to try and figure that out. And all of these subjects of plasma are natural. And that's a very key point, because energy is always in motion, going through various dimensions and geometries, and it has a dynamic condition. And so we've recognized that there is a body condition, and there's a mental condition, and there's a governance, and there's a transformation of energy from somewhere to something. And we are in a transport vehicle right here, right now. So we're looking at how do we go from here to there, and excuse me, and okay. And we see that we have products like the sun, the moon, the earth, and then we have ourselves and all the biodiversity on this planet. And what is the independent variable that makes this happen, right? That's what we want to figure out. So, a moment, please. So, the purpose of building bridges. Obviously, connecting 2 points, then be able to go from here to there. So we started with terminology, got into understanding. Now we have a knowing, and we need this knowing because we don't have time to know about the details. The details of the knowledge are part of the connection, but we don't have time to know all the details. And what we have to know is the basics, and the basics have to do with the difference between matter plasmas. And matter plasmas can be physical and they can be plasmatic. And the difference has to do with the tactileness. Physically, we can touch it and see it. Plasmatically, we can't, but we can sense it. And so science has to recognize that this is another form of verification and validation. But we are preoccupied with the materialism. And that materialism is a manifestation of the physicality. To manifest physicality, that is a process of nuclear decay. And so we understand that in our science. So It is the process of the gravitational transition of reality, the gravitational transition of reality. And in effect, we start to then substitute other kinds of realities, such as the pursuit of money. And that reality becomes a proxy. And that those proxies end up limiting us. So really, we are over-focused on the pursuit of our limitations. And so one of the purposes of these classes is to figure out where these limitations are and how can we cross over through these limitations, because in plasma science, there are no limitations. So we're all very good detectives, and we like to look at the clues, and when we find them, then examine them, and then we make hypotheses. And of course, the forever seeing is believing. These are all limiting the possibilities, because we all know that eye is in the beauty of the beholder. So, or beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We get confused sometimes. So that's why we ask the questions. And then we find that why is not the question, why is the answer? Because you know why? Because it's there. What we don't know is what caused it to be there. That's what we're looking for. And so we already know the answer. It's the lack of evidence is the evidence. And that we have to recognize. And is it a murder mystery? No, no. You can't be born to a place if it doesn't already exist. So the earth existed before you. There's a sequence. And the earth has its own biology and has derived that by creating energy paths. So energy comes in and energy goes out. But in order to maintain it, it has to go around. If it can't be maintained, it may just go right on through. And we won't even know that that energy is there. So all of this is attraction and repulsion, what we call the magnetical gravitational forces. And we, as magravs, we are emitting energy and we are absorbing energy. So the earth likewise is emitting and absorbing energy. So the magrav condition is between that of the ground and the sky, which we call the magnetosphere. How we exchange energy, how much we exchange energy that's called the rate. So the rate of exchange of energy is all determined by susceptibility. And the rate of exchange of energy, which is the gradient charge, and that is determined by the charge gradient. So this is what we are looking for, because we have created the cups of life, but now we've stepped into a new universe. And finally, we can understand that within our own capability, we have created our own extremely dynamic plasma reactor. And so when we produced the GANs, and we produced it from something, but it seems like it came from nowhere. But something is always something, as opposed to being something else. And if it came from nowhere, and we produced the GANs in a rotating field, and then on the picture on the right-hand side, in the middle of the GANs, there's a hole. So from nothing, we created something, and then from something, we created nothing. It may sound like double talk, but we need to sort it out, okay? We need to sort it out. And that's why there's a right hand, there's a left hand. The right hand is on the right side, the left hand is on the left side. We need to sort it out. We cannot abdicate our knowledge of this. But what we also cannot abdicate is our understanding of the universal order of creation of matters. You know, if the earth was here before we arrived, And then we arrived. Where did we come from? And then how do we get here? So the first thing we wanted to do was to create the earth. And then creating the earth, we wanted to create ourselves. Okay, so that's the creation of matter. And we matter. But there's a point that we came from, and there's a connection between these points. And how was that? So that was described in book number 2, The Structure of Life. And then we find, well, things break up. Okay, so that's one concept, but that concept is the origin of the universe. So where one divides into two. And so we find that when things come together, they are more than the sum of the parts. So this is kind of confusing. The creation of the universe is created as totality. And this totality comes together from energy. But because energy is always in motion, we have to give it a charge. That's what a charge is. A charge is the definition of energy in motion. And we create a basic structure called a maggrav, which is formed from matter, dark matter, and antimatter. And we repeat this in all of these classes because it's just fundamental. It's very easy to discuss. And then you take two magravs and connect them together, and you see that there's an exchange of energy. So why is there an exchange of energy? And what is going on then? And we're creating a principal matter. So the energy is coming, what we call PM ticks. These are rays of energy in the universe. And together they come together and they create a force field interaction. And we said in the past, a common denominator, not the lowest common denominator. A common denominator creates this interaction, creates a maggrav. That is the essence of creation. So what is our point of view with respect to this, and how much does it matter to us? So as you can see in our life today, it's extremely important. So depending on how each individually wishes to learn, how much each individual wishes to explore, the basic rule is attraction and repulsion. So you have a fascination with a certain kind of business, that's an attraction. You have a dislike of another business, that's repulsion. So whatever you're doing, there's always attraction and repulsion involved. So whether you are involved in plasma science or not, you are involved in plasma science, which means that you have a capability of creating, or you have a capability of decaying. But when we say creation and when we say decay, it has to come from a point, and that point is a maggrav. So when we look at the plasma science, we have to see that it is over and above the maggrav condition. So it becomes a maggrav plus a magnetical force, or a maggrav plus a gravitational force. So, and understand that this is a two-way street. So we are constantly emitting, which is magnetical, and we are absorbing, which is gravitational. So whatever we emit is what we are creating, and whatever we absorb is whatever we call loosely as decay, because that's what we're doing, isn't it? When we eat food, for instance, we take a living organism such as a carrot, and we eat it. So this is a form of decay, but this is a natural process on this planet. And what happens in this process of nuclear decay, and it is nuclear decay, it's the same model, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's a carrot or it's a sun or it's an atom. A neutron splits up into an electron-proton combination. And in the course of that split up, there's a release of the PM tick. So now you have another ray. So you have the creation of a ray and you have the decay of a neutron. So you have creation and decay always happening simultaneously. And this is the essence of plasma science. This is where it's different from the physical science. So we see that whether it's a creation or a decay, it's always coming from some point. So if we have a creation, it stems from a decay, and so the creation becomes the residue. But if we have a creation through decay, then the decay becomes the residue. There is no garbage, you see. There is no garbage, and there is no a way to throw it. All of this is to emphasize the connection. So we have the PM ticks coming through the atmosphere, whatever that is, whether it's a space atmosphere or Earth atmosphere. So this is a magnetical effect. Then we have the gravitational combination of the three dimensions, X, Y, and Z, right? So we have the x-axis of rotation, the y-axis of transition through the poles, and the z-axis of the field strength. And how big is it? I don't know. How big is large? You always have to have some kind of relationship. And when you have this relationship and then you make the connection, and then all of a sudden you have the knowing and you say, hey, you know, I didn't have to go to school to do that. That's right. You just made a transition. And that transition is basically emphasized here, where we have the PM ticks, which are actually energy parceling units. Energy parceling units. So they themselves have all of the elements within, all of the essences within for that creation. And when these common denominators, as I say, not the lowest common denominators, come together, when they diverge all over and they meet up with others, then they begin the convergence process. So we create a force field made of antimatter, which is the principal matter, dark matter, which is the transition matter, and then the matter, which is the convergence matter, and the combination of these three create the plasma. And it is this plasma then that does the conversion process. Conversion with what? Well, first of all, with itself, it creates a gravitational condition, and then it has a field interaction with wherever it is. And so that is the inertia. So we understand better our terminologies and how they impact. So what we're saying is that the attraction and repulsion forces are the bases of the gravitational magnetical forces. And they represent a convergence of energies or a divergence of energies, but there are independent variables. Independent variables in an interdependent universe. And if the universe is independent, can it really be a universe? Just asking. So we look at the cups of life, and I want to review this because this is the Keshe Foundation. And this is how we, as basic knowledge seekers, all have the capability of not only protecting ourselves during the pandemic, but protecting our neighbors. You know, a healthy neighbor is a healthy community. And so we all need to do that. So these are the cups of life. And so we look at it, and we take physical zinc and copper and nanocoat it, and we create a magnetical gravitational field. And then we take a second cup with a physical copper and a nanocoated copper. We create the same thing, a magnetical gravitational field. So, and we can actually put these cups side by side and create a field. But if we're using them for the pandemic, then keep them at least a meter apart, okay? Because each field has its own individual purpose, which we've talked about many times. And now we found that the rate of success with this can be dropped down to hours. So the purpose of the cups of man is to assist us in our relationship with ourselves. So they're called the cups of man, because what are we? We are a combination of the emotional and physical context. And so that has a maggrav condition, which is a balance between a magnetical gravitational field. It is at this point that we can have a soul come in, because you have to have, like you say, you want to come somewhere, it has to be there first. So each of these cups has the maggrav condition. Each of these cups then derives a soul. The combination of the three cups, now that we've introduced the cup of soul, has a soul, so that the three, the combination, work as a unit. So you can't see them apart, see them as a field. This is what we're looking now. The future is looking like this. Look at the field that is being generated. If you understand what the components are, you can do it through a physical discernment. But there are other ways and means of detecting this. We said that already. You can sense it. So you have to have that trust. And you have to have some kind of field of reference. So when we did the cup of inertia, we introduced nano-coated copper, and we had a magnetical gravitational field. And then we had the cup of the earth. We introduced a new component, the nano-coated iron coil. So we had a nano-coated zinc and we had a nano-coated copper. Oh, three different elements, but we still created the magnetical gravitational field. So the point is, when you look at the earth and what's going on inside the earth, do you really know what's going inside the earth? And so one of the products that we have produced are ceramic cups of life with the GANS material infused in. And we have a cup of sweet, we have a cup of pressure, we have a cup of life. And we've been trying these, and it's astounding the success we have. You just basically pour water that you have into the cup, let it sit for 30 minutes, and then drink it basically morning, noon, and night, and then also before you go to bed. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for this sequence. So the point is, you don't know by looking at the cup really what's kind of GANS is in there. But is it the same GANS? Well, what does it mean to be the same? So there are a lot of things that can affect the differences. So even something as much as like quantity, percentage of ratios and field strengths. But when you look at the teacup or when you look at the ceramic cup of life, if you don't know about plasma science, it's all the same stuff to you. So we're on the verge of unchaining ourselves, because in physicality, the way the atoms work together is they link up, but they do the same thing in the plasma science. It's just that each of them is monatomic, and this gives them added capability. So when we put all these cups together as a single unit, they are doing the same thing, and they create, each of them, a magnetical gravitational field with a soul, and collectively all of them come together and do exactly the same thing. Today's topic is biology. And what I wanted to add on to what we talked about last week was some classifications that we were looking at. And it was a lot of fun, but it didn't really tell us much in terms of how things worked. The thing that we did focus on is that there were different climate zones. So we understand that deserts are dry and tropical rainforests are wet. And there's quite a difference. So the range between the two is quite phenomenal. And we're going to talk about that today a little bit more. Of course, there are temperate zones, which are warm, and there's Arctic zones, which are very cold. And so there's a range. And there's a survivability within each of those zones. Then there's water, but there's two types of water. There's a fresh water and a seawater. And what I want to draw your attention to is this characteristic with fresh water. It demands a change. In other words, it can change a pH of 2 within 24 hours and still maintain stability. But the change of 2 within the range of, say, 6.5 to 8.5 on the pH scale. And so what that means is, first of all, that fish can lay the eggs in a higher pH. And when the pH of the water drops down to 6.5, then the eggs can be softer. The acid water makes the shells softer, so the eggs can hatch. And this pH maybe will stay low for a couple of hours and then bounce back up to its normal state, whatever it is. And at that point, the fish are already out of the eggs and into the water. So this is a very nice characteristic, and it's gives us the abundance of having the biodiversity that we saw in the Rift Lakes and the biodiversity that we see in the Amazon. But there's a lot of biodiversity in the sea. And the body mass of the seawater is far greater than the body mass of the freshwater. And with the seawater, it demands stability. And so we see that a pH change of 0.2 in 24 hours is the maximum that it can tolerate. When it goes beyond that, that becomes lethal. So in freshwater, if we go outside of the pH range, and if we go outside of the transition rate of 2 within 24 hours, that is lethal. In seawater, only 0.2. So there's a reason. And this is the thing. We need to understand better these rates, because we know that when we were born, we were in water and we came into the air, and we were able to do that transition. But we also know that we can drown in water. So what's the difference? So this is where the scientists have to look. There are conditions. The absence of the evidence and the absence of the understanding points the way. Furthermore, there's an underground culture and there's an airborne culture. And we don't know enough about this underground culture, but we're going to talk a little bit about it today. From what we do know, we call that the bioculture. And then, of course, what we know about the air is climate. And so these are just various climate zones. So not a very detailed discussion, but the thing about the details is when you have the money and when you have the knowledge and the education, and you want to use this knowledge to terraform, and the terraforming is of what we're trying to do on Mars, we had to have a certain knowledge on how to do that. Because if the atmosphere is different from what we're used to, then there has to be some kind of adaptation in another environment. And if that environment is not ours, then we have to artificially create that to mimic ours. Well, before we go there, let's get it right here. So the Biosphere Project was started in 1987 in Arizona, and this project lasted for 2 years. And what had happened in those 2 years is the oxygen level went down to 4.2% instead of the normal 21%. And there are some factors like outside lighting was preventing photosynthesis, and microbes were introduced that some of the participants got ill. This is on Earth, you understand. And then, of course, oxygen had to be imported from outside the greenhouse. The whole purpose was to have a sustainable environment inside the greenhouse and in a hostile environment. We couldn't do that in a friendly environment. That project was abandoned after 2 years. And one of the culprits, of course, was algae. So they got to be very, very good at growing algae. So this was in 1987. Now, 20 years before that, and the technology was there to feed 30,000 people on 2.4 acres. What does that mean? Well, you could feed the entire population of the United States on 12,000 acres. That's 5,000 hectares. The landmass of the United States is 9.8 million square kilometers, or shall we say 2.43 billion acres. We only need 12,000 to feed the whole population. And this was known 20 years before. And they didn't call this the Biosphere 2 project because it was the only biosphere project that they did. But in respect to the Earth, they gave the Earth the designation of Biosphere 1. So the Biosphere 2 project did not use advanced technology for terraforming. They used the technology that they had, and they basically failed in 2 years on Earth. Well, we're at the point of improving the agricultural yield, aren't we? And we can do this in many ways. So when we look at what we mean by plants, these plants are chemical. You see, where do these plants grow? That's a question. So we find that we have chemical factories, and in these factories, they create chemicals. The question is, are these chemicals pollution? Or in the process of making these chemicals, do they create pollution? And is this contributing to global warming? Or can we create a global cleanup? So how do we compare the chemical plants versus the natural plants? Is kind of the question. And when we look at the natural plants, we find that they have a specific affinity for a specific area on this planet. And that is determined by the environment. And generally speaking, that environment is creating a condition that is attracting that particular plant. What is the capability of that particular plant biologically? They uptake minerals and metals. So in fact, the plants clean up. They do it on their own. And when they're done, then they leave. And if you keep feeding the problem, well, then they stay. So when we look at the origin of the universe, and we said, well, physically, it made a lot of noise, or chemically, we just brought a whole bunch of stuff together and just things that, boom, just evolved. And then they duked it out, and the fittest was how we made natural selection. And then we glorified that and said, those are the chosen. But when we look at the rainforest, something funny happens. The rainforest in the Amazon is basically built on a soil top layer that is only about 4 inches. That's about 10 centimeters. Not very thick. And it's a wonder how you can get big trees to stay upright. They have to be rooted somehow. How do you support a tree, especially in a windy condition, if it doesn't have much soil to cling to? Well, we know here in North America that trees can cling to rocks. So, don't worry about the trees and the plants. They know what they're doing. We're the ones who are trying to figure this thing out. But the point is that this soil is quite, shall we say, luscious, nutritious, bountiful in energy, in nutrients. And the reason for that is because with a big rainforest, tropical rainforest cover, there's a lot of decay that is going on. But when you look at a conventional greenhouse, there's a lot of decay on the floor. And you don't see that in the forest. And the reason for it is because there's a bacteria which is able to digest it. And the rate that it digests really affects things. And so we find that the ideal conditions in the rainforest is able to digest very, very quickly. So there isn't a lot of decay hanging around when the things are all working together. But there's a lot of sand. Under this soil in the rainforest is a lot of sand. And so one has to wonder, well, okay, where does the soil come from? So we find that the soil comes from the bacteria. This is the bacteria residue. Okay, well, where does the sand come from? Well, as Mr. Kesh has explained, it comes from Africa. It is carried through the air. And so the sand is blown over and drops over the rainforest. And you can imagine that the rainforest is constantly having to try and elevate itself above the sand and lay down the soil. This was a major learning point for me in understanding the difference in how the rainforest operates. And it was a key factor in understanding that, is there oil in the soil? Or is it in the land of the sand? Because if the sand is coming from over there to over here, then how come we don't have oil? Oh, but we do have oil. We have oil in Venezuela, but Venezuela is tropical. And in the Middle East, shall we say, it's more desert-like conditions. So we have this debate, why is the oil growing in here or growing in there? And so they couldn't answer the debate, so they call it fossil fuels. And they call it limited resource. So we now know that it is an unlimited resource. And it doesn't come from fossils. It comes from something else. So what happens with this biomass that we have in the Amazon rainforest? So let's look at another example that we had in the Rift Lakes. We had Lake Victoria. It was covered with these water hyacinths. Water hyacinths draw heavy metals out of the water. They're absolutely phenomenally successful. And when they do so, and when they tend to come to the end of their life, what we did was we picked them up and spread them around the trees. And they would decay within 9 days, totally disappear. Well, where did they go? Okay, so the hyacinths create this biomass, and then in 9 days, it disappears. So we can't describe it physically as to why it happens. And we can say biologically, because of the bacteria, it breaks down the biomass. And that bacteria is creating more biomass. Okay, so the benefactor is the rainforest. Well, we had a problem in the biosphere because we were growing algae, which is very primitive. And well, protoplasm is also very primitive, single-celled organisms, okay? But there's different kind of algae. So one of the algae that the fish like to nibble on is long hair algae, but long hair algae of a certain color. And it's a real delicacy and they love it. And you know what? That algae keeps the water so clean. Absolutely amazing how clean it is. But that algae, people think algae is just algae, just like people think water is just water. That's not the case. One algae is a precursor for another algae. Okay, so it changes the nature of the water in its process. The communication to start the growth of the algae is the condition of the water. The communication to stop that condition is a change in the condition of the water. The change is another communication for the algae to go into another stage. So the algae can do this and continue to grow. And the rate of this change is a instantaneous change. So this rate of change is what we're having trouble understanding as, shall we say, laymen, non-scientists. And protoplasm, well, you know, who trains them? What school do they go to? A single cell organism that has a mouth, creates waste, has an ability to move, has a direction, has a purpose, very, very active, and it's a single cell organism. How does it do that? And then we have bacteria. And bacteria are single cell organisms, microscopic. Not that microscopic, but microscopic. Just a different scale. And one bacteria becomes a precursor for the next. And we haven't categorized all the bacteria. We have categorized the vertical people. We have categorized the horizontal people. We have categorized the biological components. But oh, forget it. Like there's so many bacteria, it's you know, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough people to research this. There's 3,000 people preoccupied with something else right now. But the point is that there is a communication, there is a connection, and one bacteria stops growing, and the next bacteria uses the previous bacteria as a food. But the next bacteria comes from the first bacteria. So there's a metamorphosis that goes on. As one bacteria creates another bacteria, then that bacteria becomes the food for the new bacteria, and so it goes on. Now, if you interrupt this cycle, some of these bacteria are extremely harmful. And in our society, we call them germs, and that's why we are preoccupied with washing our hands, because we need to wash away the germs. But we didn't say which germs. So some of these bacteria are beneficial. We need this bacteria to, you know, for instance, to digest our food. So if you don't have the bacteria in your gut, you cannot digest this food. If we don't have that bacteria, then the water hyacinths will not rot. The biomass will not rot. So if you have a biotope with a healthy bacterial load, and you'll know that it's healthy when the water is healthy, when the fish are healthy, and when the algae is healthy, okay, then you will have bacteria growing. But is that enough? Is that enough? Because where is this bacteria? So one of the places is on the surface of things. So the surface to volume ratio really plays a factor. So the more surface that you have within the volume, the more bacteria you have. And so this is when you look at the substrate and you see the different kinds of substrate. Now, one substrate is rocks. One substrate is pebbles. And another substrate is sand. The sand has the highest surface to volume ratio. And so you have beneficial bacteria in that substrate. So you find that is what washes up close to the beach, and the rocks, they stay in the middle. And where do you see the biomass most? You see it around the edges of the water. Why? Because there's a lot of photosynthesis there. And so when you have a lot of biomass and you have a lot of homes for bacteria, then you have a cleaning effect of the water. So when you look at the Rift Valley lakes, like Lake Tanganyika, which is 50 meters deep, there's no way that you can get a certain kind of bacteria down there. But is that to say that there isn't bacteria down there? Because without that bacteria, that life would not be possible. So there's different types of bacteria. But to clean that water, you have to have a certain kind of bacteria, and that bacteria is near the surface. Okay, so there has to be a circulation. And when you have the environment working properly, well, then trees are happy because the nematodes stay where they're supposed to be. They stay in the ground, okay? And so there's some kind of connection between the worms and the bacteria, right? So when the bacteria is good and they can break down the biomass and release those nutrients, release those metals, then it is providing food, which is what they want. So everything is really looking for food. Why? Because they're looking for energy. Doesn't that make sense? So when we look at things in the sea and in the land, and we see there's a difference, so we say, okay, well, the fish are in the sea and the mammals are on land. But then you say, wait a second, the whales are not a fish. And the whales also bear babies in the water. And also the whales don't have gills, they breathe air. Get fish who have gills. And some fish are labyrinth fish, they have both gills and they breathe. So there's some kind of adaptation that's going on here. And so the reference here is the rate of adaptation. The rate of adaptation is what we have to look at. And so when we're looking at our dimensions and we're saying, well, how can we go? So we know that as we climb up the mountain, the air gets more rarefied. So, and as we go under the water, then the pressure increases. So these are our transition ranges. But as we go from continent to continent, we also find different zones, different plants, different animals, and different people. So when we look at the classification like we did last week, we found that we were classifying vertical people, and then we're classifying horizontal people. Well, you know what? That wasn't giving us enough answers. What we really need to do was get into the classification of man. And the classification of man is the subject of biology. And the problem with this thing is that we have to dissect the man to find out what's going on. And so, do we understand what dissection means? Yeah, it means breaking the connection by tearing things apart to find out how they work. And is that the best way to do that? So a lot of people think so. So we dissect the man, and in the process, we spill the blood. Okay. But we know that we are created from oil and water, and oil and water don't mix. And that's a good thing. But, you know, just to give you an aside story, and it was a personal story. I was in grade 3, and I remember it quite vividly because it was a very important question for me. The teacher that day asked for a question and answer session. And, you know, I remember this so vividly, and it's very strange, okay, because it impacted me so greatly. Because she says we were going to have a free-for-all. We could talk about any subject we wanted, which is kind of risky, right? But we were only in grade 3, you know, so what was I? I was 8, 9 years old, whatever, you know, what do I know? And so I asked the question, why are we made of blood and not oil? You know, because there's a lot of oil around, right? And it'd be a lot easier to do things because then we only just, like, you know, car, just change the oil. But, you know, that was a thoughtful question. And, you know, it was a free for all. So I asked the question. And of course, the teacher knows everything. Well, she dodged the question. The question was not very well answered. And, you know, she's just because we're made of blood, just because, you know, we don't have oil coursing through our veins. We have blood coursing through our veins. Okay. Well, all right. So I had to buy that answer. I mean, what am I supposed to do? You know, I'm in school, and I'm just a kid anyway. And it was a free for all. It wasn't like I was paying for anything. So anyway, that question actually finally got answered. And it was answered by 2 different people. So the first answer, of course, is that the blood is made of iron, and that's our anchorage. But Mr. Cash answered the question as well, because there's another thing that Canadians don't understand is we have on the banks of Newfoundland, they're called the Grand Banks. And the Grand Banks are absolutely teeming with fish, as per the diaries of the previous explorers going back several hundred years. And when we say teeming with fish, the boats were literally floating on fish. There were that many fish on the Grand Banks, and hence the name Grand Banks. But the interesting thing was that we find out that this oil comes from amino acids, right? And we see that the amino acids on one side are water soluble, on the other side they're oil soluble. And these are essential for building proteins. And we see how the proteins come together now with carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, and that there is an interaction, and it creates kind of an amino star. And this is the star formation that we're talking about. And this was so successful on the Grand Banks that the fish were so prolific. And so this became, shall we say, a hotbed for the fishing industry. And it still is today, although we don't have anywhere near the supply. But the point of the matter is, it is still giving. And so the creation of this protein comes from the oil. And so some oil, we note, then becomes livestock, fish. And other oil, well, becomes what they call a fossil fuel. But it's not everywhere. There's some places they have copper, and some places they have gold. And so what is the cause of these elements, these resources being in those places? And it all has to do with positioning, okay? And the positioning has to do with the creation. And so what is the difference between copper and gold and oil? And it may have to do with the rate of change, right? So something is always something as opposed to something else. So we have a field force, but it is interacting with another field force, which is the Earth's field force. And that field force is not in the same place in all the same places. Okay, so when the combination and the is correct, and it's not the lowest common denominator, it's the common denominator. So there you have the creation of oil, and where you have the creation of copper. So let's say, for instance, copper in Chile, oil in the Middle East, gold in the Far East. And so they maintain a position based on their point of on the earth. And what is the determining factor of that? So we like to drill down into that and find out what's going on. And that's how we developed the mining industry. Well, we have another mining industry we call medicine, and this is the mining of organs. And so we'll look in our organs in our bodies, and we're not going to go through them all. We're just going to go through a few systems here. And you see that there's a positioning. So they all not only are in different positions, but they look different. You know, I mean, you know the difference between a liver and a heart. You know the difference between a kidney and a lung. And when you talk about kidneys and lungs, they come in pairs. But when you look at hearts and liver, they come individually. And then there's a circulation system. And that circulation system, is almost like a roller coaster ride. It goes through the whole body, and then it goes up around the head, and it goes around the head. And in the center, there's this big black hole, and you can't see what's going on in there. And it's kind of like a ride of horrors. And then you come back down into the body. And, there's a central nervous system and a reproductive system. And all of this is all working together. So we just have a kind of classification. And so we look at the biology of things. So we're trying to figure out this body and brain link. And then we look at respiration. And so, yeah, we breathe using lungs, but cells respirate and they don't have lungs. And then we have mouths, we like to eat, right? And then we have a stomach, we like to digest, but cells don't have mouths. They don't have a stomach, okay? And they process energy or food as energy, and they process waste as energy. And then there are some cells that, are not functioning properly. So we have enzymes. And what these enzymes do is they are spheres made up of a lipid bilayer, just like the lipid bilayer of the cells. But what they do is they engulf this damaged tissue, which is protein, and they eat it. They literally digest it. And so this is how the body is able to get rid of waste. And at that point in time, it needs to somehow get out of the system. So one of the ways we know it comes out through the alimentary canal. This process is called metabolism. And so a lot of people confuse metabolism with digestion, and they interchange the words. So in the plasma science, we're not interchanging words. Metabolism means to cast out. And, when we talk about energy exchange, you have to give before you receive. So, when you are whole as a magrav and you want to eat, you have to cast out first before you can bring the new stuff in. Otherwise, you're going to back up the train. And you won't have that, well, what we're all looking for, what we're looking for. We're looking for that warm and fuzzy feeling, right? That warm and fuzzy feeling that transcends everything, that we don't need to know all the details. And we find that the details of the stacker units, they're also feeding. And the higher feeds the lower energy. This is the plasma way. And when we look at the GANs and we see that we are producing from these physical elements, we're producing CO2, ZNO, and copper oxide, CuO. And you know what? I have a little mistake here. Why doesn't anybody tell me that I made a mistake? Very simple. At least someone's awake. So, not totally. We're getting there. Okay. We fixed the problem there, didn't we? So it's, but we also discovered that the GANS is moving and doing all sorts of things and changing the chemistry of the water. And we are 75% water. So this is a fundamental component that we need within our 5-cup system. And this 5-cup system is in a stacker unit, but we were introduced a few weeks ago to a new kind of stacker unit, a cup of universe. 1 cup fits all, shall we say. And inside that, we have some kind of independent variables, and we have to make some kind of connections, and we haven't made those connections yet. So we wanted to review physics to see if we can make these connections. And one of the things that we figured out is that when we want to understand what is going on in physical science, then we have to determine if it's man-made. And if it's man-made, and if it's physical, in other words, if you can see it and you can touch it, then that's physical. And so we looked at the physical inventory of what was on in that cup, and we listed it. So we had copper, we had zinc, iron, and galvanized iron. And then we had coils, and then we had plates, and some were nano-coated and some were bare. And then we are introducing today these connections. So we have to understand that we can have the copper, the zinc, the iron, and the galvanized wires, and they can be either bare or nano-coated, and there's a sequence, so isn't there? So when we look at the chemistry of it, then we find out it's not just chemical, because the chemical things are limited things, like we can see the color of the water based on a pH test, the physical designs that we can make with surfactant chemistry, and the alterations that we can do through the oxidation redux. But, we made some breakthroughs. So those breakthroughs were rocket science, space science, plasma science, and overcoming limitations. This is what we're talking about, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff out there that is not making sense. So one of those things was the liquid manure we were talking about. Now, the combination of the liquid manure and the plowing is something that is providing us a solution and a pollution. So if we look at what plowing does, it was invented in 1797 and patented, if you believe. So, but many people rejected it at the time because it seemed to poison the soil and foster the growth of weeds. So these were all belief systems. But the thing is is that was true. You see, because there's two types of bacteria. And one bacteria becomes another type of bacteria. And you know this. So what happens to roadkill? Inside our body, our bacteria is used to process cell metabolism. So that bacteria is aerobic. That means it's oxygen rich. When that body dies, that bacteria, in order to survive, changes into an anaerobic bacteria. That rate of change has to be quick enough. The rate of change has to be quick enough for it to be able to go from an aerobic condition to an anaerobic condition. It does not introduce new anaerobic bacteria. It is aerobic bacteria being converted to anaerobic bacteria. And it is the anaerobic bacteria which eliminates roadkill in 9 days. It's what eliminates the hyacinth biomass that we put around the trees in 9 days, okay? And it is this bacteria that when you plow the soil, you take the aerobic bacteria and you bury it. And then it dies and becomes part of the bioload. And then you take the anaerobic bacteria and you expose it to the air and it dies and it becomes part of the bioload. So the rate of change through plowing was too radical for the bacteria to change from aerobic to anaerobic. However, it isn't right across the board, just those that are affected by the plowshares. You see, that's the point. Now, the purpose of bacteria, as we said, is to break down this manure. And we know that this is working because in the municipal dumps, we have these chimneys that are spewing out methane, and they have to be lit. Methane burns. Methane is an energy, a fuel. If they go out, municipal dumps may explode because there's an awful lot of heat being generated through decomposition. The problem with these manure holding tanks is that the new manure that is being added at a phenomenal rate. And so it becomes quite difficult to break down this manure. And so the manure holding lagoons begin overflowing. Well, they have to get rid of this. So they have combined it by putting these injectors on the ends of the plows. So as the land is plowed, this manure is being injected. And of course, we just discussed the problem with the bacteria again. So now we understand how the solution on one end is creating a problem on the other end. And we become the benefactors because this enters into our aquifers and enters into our drinking water. This is a fact. But methane, just so for interest, when it burns, it produces CO2 and H2O. So CO2 is carbon dioxide in physicality as a physical gas, and H2O is water as a physical water. And we know that burning any fuel produces an energy. Interesting thing about the CO2, of course, we all know is creates a food for the plants. But for some reason, it's not understood that CO2 is also a very efficient insulator. And so it's quite essential to the greenhouses. So in order to be quite successful, there have to be a complete chain of events. And it isn't just chemical, but when we looked at the chemical inventory of the universal cup, we found that the equations didn't balance. we brought in sodium, chlorine, hydrogen, and oxygen, and we created salt water. So this is where we're bringing elements together which don't necessarily balance out from what we've been thinking of, but they do, except that we can bring in other salts. And so we had the chemical inventory of all the physical elements, and we have the chemical inventory of the environment. So we have sodium salt, potassium salt, magnesium salt, and calcium salt. And so when we're looking at the periodic table of elements, the first thing we notice is that they are elementary. That means they're all standalone. And that's not the way the life works. Well, life works in combination. So the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. And as knowledge seekers, we have the knowing of the details competing against the details of knowing. It's the knowing that we're after, not the details. So as nice as the periodic table of elements is, and we will get to that more in the intermediate and advanced classes, but what we've done is we've switched over the basics of the magnesium and calcium and put it on the right-hand side of this table. And so let's look at all the things that we need for our basic cups of life. So we have hydrogen, carbon. Now, we should change the name of carbon, shouldn't we? I think Jalal would agree. We should, from now on, call it carbogen. Wouldn't that make sense? Hydrogen, carbogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. Wouldn't that make sense? But anyway, then we'd have iron, copper, and zinc on one side, and we have sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium on the other side.
Wait. Okay.
I hear somebody.
Okay. So why don't you to change it to carbon, nitrobone, oxybone?
So we can debate that, and you know, we can create a course in university and have fun, right?
Yes. Thank you.
But it's an excellent point. You see, now we have a debate going on, but you know, this is not what we're after. What we're after is to say, we have a kit, like in music. You know all the notes, and you know the instrument, you know which way is up, which way is down. And does that represent the music? Something represents the music. And that's what we're looking at, the cup of the universe, the independent variable, the music that makes the cup of universe work. And so we are on the road to making this cup of the universe work. So all of us as individual knowledge seekers in our homes can have access to this. And we can basically have like a little center that, a little central of research in our own homes. But our own homes can be in our own minds as well, because the brain is kind of like the cup of the universe, and it has its own biology, its own biotope. So we are all looking for creature comforts, aren't we? That warm and fuzzy thing. And so scientifically, we have a lot of ideas, and emotionally, we have a lot of wishes, and we have to display a lot of courage. And what we really like to display is a lot of love, and get this planet working properly, and understand that in space, the space is full of energy. Energy is always in motion. And this energy is always the plasma fuel that makes the world go round. And all things begin working in combination. That combination is the magnetical and gravitational pushing and pulling forces, which when they become in balance, create a maggrav condition, plus the residue. And we know there is a residue because now we understand when we put all these components together in the cup of life, and we found new products We found zinc GANs, copper GANs, CO2 GANs, calcium carbide GANs, CaCO3, CaCO3 GANs, calcium carbonate GANs. And then, of course, the amino acid, the oil, and the water, the H2O. We had all of that going on. And the reason we did that was because someone whose name is Mr. Cash figured out the new atomic math. You take the mass of the neutron and it equals the mass of the proton and the mass of the electron plus the mass of the PM ticks, right? But plus the total mass of the matter, antimatter, and dark matter. And that is the totality. And that is all achieved through the energy level balance and positioning. And so we find that all of our studies, which we are so time consuming, revolve around our tiny little perfect world, that little red dot in the bottom right hand corner, which is our universe. And we find that the rest of the universe is working quite well without us. You must admit, and it is a lot bigger than what we're operating here. So there's no reason to make any pretense with respect to the amount of knowledge that we have. It's knowledge of what, that's what we need to know, because the universe is feeding itself. And that's what we need to do. We need to be able to feed ourselves. Everything that we do is the plasma feeding. Why? Because we are energy consumers. And there are many ways to recharge. So the recharging done in physicality is the slowest way, most inefficient way. Doing it in the plasma way is a lot better. And so we find that there are, when we refer to windward and leeward directions on a point of reference, we are at the watershed moment. All right. And the leeward side doesn't have a lot of wind. We have a lot of wind. We are on the windward side. Okay. And what is the difference? Well, it's the missing ingredients. And we could say that they're chemical, but they're not. They're moral. We could say that they're physical, but they're not. They're plasmatic. And we could say that, well, maybe it's something funny about gas. Well, we can't explain it. Not with the physical science, because these subjects are out of range. And a famous scientist I introduced last week, Rupert Sheldrake, put forward morphogenic resonance. And he's classed as a pseudoscientist. Yet, he was talking about the missing ingredient. And he just gave it a name. And because it wasn't there, he couldn't prove it, he couldn't show it. But you know what? The absence of evidence is the evidence. So we see in our physical activity that we create within us aerobic acid and anaerobic acid, but also we create lactic acid. And lactic acid is that pain that you get into your muscles. And so what happens is when we have a lactic acid buildup that builds up so fast that we don't have the metabolism capability in our body to remove it, that when our muscles expand and contract, they are literally rolling over these balls of lactic acid, and that is painful. And they say, well, no pain, no gain. No, that's no pain. It's a wonderful thing. You know, you're getting back to nature. And that's why a lot of people do a lot of physical activity, because they want to get back to nature. But see, the point is, we are already in nature. We are already plasmatic. because we didn't come here because of the physicality of the sun and the physicality of the earth. We came here because of the plasmatic energy that is behind them. And we are plasma beings. So we have to understand that we are now at a watershed moment. And so if you are incapable of explaining properly what works, show them what doesn't work, and understand that it's time consuming to go through the physical elements and the chemical elements of botany categorizations and the biology categorizations. Okay, that is the leeward side. Okay, so wind is coming on this side and it goes over the mountains to the other side, and that's where they are on the other side there. That is the watershed. But guess what happened this week? Watch closely. Guess what happened? The leeward side is the gravitational side. The windward side is the magnetical side. The winds of change are blowing. And things have changed. And they will continue to change. So when someone gives you 35 seconds to tell them what is plasma, ask them for a few more seconds, maybe 45 seconds. Tell them plasma is a kind of energy state, and the plasma science is the study of creation, right? What is your point of view on this? So we either restricted by the limitations of science, or we transcend the limitations of science. And this is the important subject that we talked about today. So when we look at this convergence of energy, and we see that there's a plasma side and a physical side, and there's a transformation from the plasma side and another transformation to the physical side. And there's a dream state where dreams become reality, and there's an inertia state that involves a combination with the environment. And then in between, there are transfer states. And these transfer states indicate the rate of change. And the rate of change in the lower states is slower by many orders of magnitude. The rates of change in the higher is higher by many orders of magnitude. So when we talk about transcendence, this is what we mean. When fields attract together common denominators, it doesn't have to be 100%. You have an attraction, but when they come together, there has to be an adaptation. The question now comes, how fast can we make this adaptation? And if we're going to travel from here to there, and if from here to there is from this planet to another planet, then our adaptation is going to have to be what we call PDQ, pretty quick. And this is where the advanced technology is going. And we're only talking about basics because that's within our range. And we have billions of people still on this planet who are not even aware of this. So understand our point of view. Our point of view is from our souls. And all 7 billion people on this planet have a soul. So by connecting that way, we can bridge this knowledge bridge, and we can connect through the knowing. And it is from that knowing that adaptation, which is going at an order of magnitude and many orders of magnitude faster, we can become more effective. And so we said at the beginning, it's very important for us to be positive with respect to not only our outlook, but in terms of our presentation. And we need to change the whole presentation. Don't get bogged down with the details. So understand that our perception of reality is the manifestation of reality. It's when two fields come together that form another. That is what manifestation is. And it's the plasma feeding that leads to the manifestation. So what are you feeding? What are you manifesting? So is it tangible or non-tangible, visible or non-visible, physical or plasmatic? And so there are two realities. There's a physical reality and a plasmatic reality. That's how we interpret this. But you have to have the plasmatic reality as a substructure for the physical reality. So therefore, both realities are a manifestation, and both give you a form artifact, like an archaeologist looking for an artifact, and you say, well, what is there? And they say, well, I don't see anything there. And then you find, guess what? A motion of presence is also a form artifact of what? Of energy in motion. This whole subject is about energy in motion and how our soul is playing with this. And so our physicality and our constant limitations of these physical subjects, as time consuming as they are to dwell on, we need to know their position, because that's the map. That's where we are, and that's where we're going from. And so we want to and watch very closely. We need to elevate our viewpoint. All right. We need to look at things from a different perspective. We need to change your soul limitations. And so that's the subject that we need to get to with our friends, our neighbors. Forget the family, they will never appreciate you. I think we all have that problem. But here's a rule, sequence. You have to understand the sequence. So today we talked about our body and how we dove into our body. We not only took our organs, but then we took apart these organs and we had organelles. And then inside these organelles, we had cells. And we know from these cells that we were created from protein. And we know this protein was the folding over of essential fatty acids. And these essential fatty acids come from the DNA. And the DNA comes from the amino acid. So everything that we've talked about is post-amino acid. Post-amino acid. Post-amino acid is the science of physicality. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. You need to be a rocket scientist to get into pre-amino acid reality, okay? So when you're discussing a subject, you want to know, what are you talking about? Where does it fit in this sequence? Simple. So when we put all these things together, we see there's a vertical life, there's a horizontal life. All of these involve a matter state. And so when we look at trying to discuss, are we discussing angles or are we discussing angels? We have a vertical enhancement and we have a horizontal enhancement. And the difference between two is more than just 90 degrees. And we will be discussing that more in the future, because right now, what we're trying to do is to bridge the gap between what's going on the leading edge and where we are. We need to go through these basics and bridge the gaps, but do it at a higher order of magnitude. So that's why there's the battle between what we call knowledge and knowing. We all know. And what we know is that energy can be binding, and we do that at the expense of others. So this is called abuse. And the biggest problem with abuse is that it's only possible because morality is the missing ingredient. And when we learn is that the cross you double cross is your eternal burden, because in order to maintain this, you have to consume energy. Not my problem. Ethics of the universe is what drives the energy. And that involves morality, compassion, and courage. These are the building blocks of creation. And without that, there is no creation. There is no continuity. So in order for us to maintain this continuity, welcome to the new space age. We have crossed over the watershed. And as we understand plasma science better, we understand ourselves better. We understand our physical destination state, and we understand our dynamic transfer state better. And then we understand how we're operating better. And we see the energy that is flowing. And we see how our energy can flow through the universal cup. And we will be talking about that more later. The thing is, what goes around comes around. That is how we keep a mag-grav condition. And when we bring all these forces together, we don't have to decide what environment we're in. We have to decide, how do we keep these forces together? What is that mag-grav condition? What are we trying to achieve? And when we're trying to achieve an elevated state, we have to understand that we have to defer to our soul. And our soul understands peace. And that is the link. That is the food. We have to tune into that, turn on to that, and drop out of our dependence on our physicality in terms of energy flow, and then we will receive. So really the question comes down to is, what kind of pattern are you providing? Because that's how you get the energy. And all of us are, looking to be patriots. That's the independent variable, isn't it? The patriot. What makes us patriots? And patriots of what? We're patriots of peace and messengers of peace and friendship. And so as the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute is delivering plasma science in putting it into the public domain, we're asking for the World Peace Treaty. We're asking for everyone to sign it with their pen and sign it with their heart, because their pen has to follow the heart. And so we can achieve physical and emotional harmony and vitality. And this is the truth. And then knowledge seekers are always seeking the truth. Is that enough? Is that enough to get us across the bridge where we can make a difference? When you have the universal language of knowing and you become a universal patriot, then you'll be able to deliver quickly plasma science in exchange for peace on Earth. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Over to you, Mark.
Okay. Wow. That was quite in depth for someone who doesn't encourage details, but of course there are details within the details and more details within those details. But you've certainly opened up a lot of different areas here, Alex. And I was just wondering, as far as flying goes, would you consider adding a basic flying class to the schedule? It was beautiful to hear that in Linz. Was it Kay who said that, or Azar, that there were these ganses on the table, and Mr. Keshe said if you knew how to mix them, you would fly right now. And what would we do if we knew how to fly? I think it would come to us. It's almost like placing a baby in the water. They start to swim. And so I think we'll be doing the same thing. Jalal seemed to want to
The
interact.
question,
Yes,
the
so-
question will come to you. What then?
Yes, I was going to ask you if you'd want to open anything up about your interaction there with Alex on the periodic table, or I didn't quite catch what you were saying. We call it not carbon, but Alex said carbogen, and you said, I'm not sure what you said.
What I said.
You said, Alex said carbogen, I thought, and you said,
Yeah.
why don't we call it?
Carbon, nitrobon, hexabon.
Aha. We may have a new periodic table being created in this meeting.
But this
Between
is
you
the
and
plasma.
Alex.
Wait,
Yes.
wait.
No,
This is a plasma
Take your
before
time. Take your time.
it goes to the matter state. Carbon 12 and carbon 14 and carbon 16 carbon. We call it carbon 12 and nitrogen and oxygen in the matter state.
So in
And
outer
these-
space, do you have this measuring device?
We will have I am kidding with you. Okay, I will jump in to 10 minutes. Just give me 10 minutes, and then if you like, we can jump together here.
Okay, we'll see you in 10.
Yes.
Okay, Mark, let's wrap
Jalal
this thing up
hasn't-
in 9 minutes.
Oh, okay, no. Let's hear more. Randy, thought I heard your voice.
Yes, Jalal taught us the other night about carbon 340 called coffee bomb. That's the only element he likes in his class,
Aha.
is more coffee.
Good, and it was so nice to hear the energies we don't have to get from coffee.
Are you opening the camera with me with something?
No?
No, Randy.
Oh, okay.
That's my secret.
And if I could just add, I think just a little housekeeping, that the testimonials meeting tomorrow with Rick. I think that starts about 8 p.m. CEST. I didn't see it on the schedule, and I thought it was the second, is it Monday of every month? So just keep that in mind. If you have testimonials and you'd like to share them or just be present and support the meeting, I think it is tomorrow, but I didn't see anything in the chat about it yet. So he may, or I could be totally wrong. And of course, we didn't get to cover the plasma dome either today, and we haven't forgotten about it. Many of us have probably gone out and sprayed like myself today, but Mr. Kesh also encouraged us to use some of the ganses you have and release them, allow them to go out into the environment. And we saw this with Kay in the fields, that they know what to do and they know where to go, or they know where to go and they know what to do when they get there. So all you have to do is release them and it'll go to work all on its own. And it can be a combination of ganses, different ganses, a single gans, or like I said, a combination. And this is all part of getting this planet, I would say, preconditioned in a way, and us as well, to learning what we can do and what we can create and the conditions we can change or create in the universe. So I didn't want to forget about the Peace Dome, and I don't want to go into it per se. I'm hoping that people will have some questions for Alex about this. Last few minutes or 45 minutes or so we've heard. So we'll just open up the floor and let's see if anyone would like to get things started. We want to thank you, Alex, for that was quite a long and lengthy presentation. And like I said, covering many different points there.
So, Mark, the subjects like that we've talked about the last 4 weeks, like these are individual courses that one would even study in university and even postgraduate classes, like you go right into PhD level, you understand? And so that career would span a lifetime. So as long as this class is, it is not a lifetime. What we have to do is to speed the process up if we want to move ahead. But we don't want to drop what we have. Okay. We've spent many, many years building up this knowledge. This knowledge is extremely valuable and it has helped us in so many ways. But when we put limitations on this knowledge and we find that we don't know something, so instead of going beyond that knowledge, we go to a different knowledge. So that's why we went from physics to chemistry. And then from chemistry, we went into biology. But, you know, biology is still not answering all of the questions, right? Because we're only down to the bacterial level. So we now, as you can see by the schedule, we have other things to do. But the point is, these are all physical. These are all basics. And when we look at this whole thing, we don't have a lifetime, each of us, to dwell on each of these subjects. So we have to have a transcendency. And this transcendency that we have at this point in time is just a basic knowing with respect to my classes. But Mr. Cash has advanced knowing, okay? And it's going concurrently. So we don't have a lifetime and we don't have a suitable rate of change. Okay, so those things have to come together. You see my point?
Yes. You mean we could spend a millennium on unraveling these things and still not get to the bottom of them?
That's exactly the point. Well, we haven't
I
gotten to the
mean,
bottom
the
of it.
soul already has a double PhD in all of this. And isn't it the soul of physicality or the physicality we're trying to convince or to cooperate in a way? But the
I
soul,
don't
like,
think,
yeah, go ahead.
not with this audience. This audience is the change. This audience is the winds of change. It's the other souls who don't know which way these winds are blowing.
Right.
We're here to help them. Yeah.
Right. And Kay brought up that little cough Mr. Kess seemed to have in the last. So let's take 1 minute or 45 seconds and just allow Mr. Kesh to know we're all thinking about him. We miss him here in the meeting. I'm sure he's pulling his energy with all the different projects. He might have gotten a little bit drained, let's say, but probably not. But whatever the reason, let's just send him some fields of warmth and comfort and whatever he needs. And just that we're thinking of him and wishing him all the best. So let's just take 20 seconds on that. And you do it all in your individual ways. Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes. I think Jalal went for a fresh cup of coffee. And Alex, did you get to warm yours up yet?
Yes, it's up to room temperature.
Ah, great. If you like it at room temperature, that is. Shweta put in the chat, yes, my dear Alex, we are, always are universal patriots. Thank you. Thank you so much, my
Oh.
dear, for all the love, always. Blessings of MMA. Salam. Namaste. Salute.
Thank you, Shweta.
You're very appreciated here, Alex, as I'm sure in every class you go. We're all learning from each other, and that's one of the beauties here. that no one really has a corner on it because it's so huge. But the soul understands it and carries the double PhD in this knowledge. And it's hard for our physicality to even sort of comprehend that the knowledge is so large. But over time we will, and as we start moving and operating more in the dimensions of the plasma, and or whatever way you'd like to operate, I think we'll become to the point where we don't have to equivocate on any kind of subject, that we're very confident and understand it from A to Z, let's say. As you see with some of the CEOs that start on the ground floor by sweeping the building, and over time they build their way up, and they know every facet, every brick, every switch, every key in the building. And I think this is the point that we will arrive at, or it'll be instantaneously revealed to us at the time of need. So we'll be experiencing some of these things, and we'll be able to share them for sure. Would anyone like to ask Alex anything or add to the knowledge or something that they understood? I didn't get a confirmation on testimonials. Does anyone know on that if it is tomorrow? But I guess we'll find out. But be on the lookout, and let's support Rick in his efforts, because he's been there and hasn't missed, I don't think one, maybe one because he lost the power or something. But he's been right by Mr. Kesh's side from the very beginning, and totally dedicated to this science and getting it out to the others. I'm sure his soul is working.
There's one thing about Rick that you have to understand. He's a real freak of nature, you know, because he is the Kesh Foundation and he is Canadian. And that is as diametrically opposed as you can get today, because I, as a Canadian, am not allowed to travel on public transit. So we all need to give a plasma standing ovation for the efforts that Rick has done, because this has all come together through his support with the core group and all the other groups around the
No
Kesh
question.
Foundation.
It was only Mr. Kesh and Rick in the beginning, and look what it's grown into. All the different groups and hundreds of millions of knowledge seekers, and now moving into the manufacturing and the processing and the television. So we want to thank Mr. Kesh and Rick and all of us. As he says, Mr. Kesh says, it's not one anymore, it's all of us.
There is one other point that Mr. Kesh brought up, Mark, and that was that you know, that there have been a lot of how should we say, obstructions and subterfuges going along in the process.
Yes.
And this has made things a lot more difficult. But overall, this is an annealing process, you know, it makes you tougher. But what it demonstrates to you, and there was an outstanding comment that he made, because there was a revelation with respect to the new center. It's actually amazing that with all the opposition that we even made it to that stage. And
yes,
that means that there's another factor, right? And that's what's the missing element. That's the thing that we have to take into account. And so when Mr. Kesh is talking about the fields and looking at the fields, you really have to you really have to know what's going on in the process. But to know is to trust. So you trust the process and you trust yourself within that process. So you don't need an edifice really to have that trust, like a church, let's say. You know, you don't need that. So it's not a form of worship. It's a form of being and doing. And if it's truthful, then the plasma, it gravitates. And if it is deceptive, then the plasma is repulsive. So that's why there is no war in the universe, okay? Because there's no product that is derived from it, and you become lonely. And that is a horrible thing. And so even if you're lonely in your physicality, you're not
Alex.
alone.
Alex,
Yes, Jalal.
why don't you drink your coffee?
You gonna take over?
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Mark,
Yes,
can you please whiteboard?
make you co-host or whiteboard. Okay,
Whiteboard, please.
let's see if we can do this. Okay, Alex, let's see here.
Or Alex can share whiteboard.
I'm going to continue. Now I give you a whiteboard. The last time I gave someone a whiteboard, it didn't seem to, it appeared on my screen, and there it is again. It's appearing on the first screen rather than the second screen. Alex, can you take over? It's giving me the ability to use the whiteboard. I don't know why. Alex, would you mind giving Jalal a whiteboard, please? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Okay. I will draw magraphs.
Just give me a second, Jalal. Let me just, I did, oh, I see.
No, Dan
Here
has
we
done
go.
it. Oh, okay. Okay, I thought you saw that, Alex.
I
Okay.
am so fortunate with you guys. Thank you very much. Okay. Just step by step with me, guys. Plasma with another plasma. Physicality, emotion, soul. Physicality, emotion, and soul. The three components always there. So this plasma give from the highest, and this plasma give from the highest, which created a soul. When this soul exists, he take over. And then created the physicality. Now, if you remember the maghrab, receive, work with it, deliver higher to the emotion. Receive, work with it, deliver to the soul level. Receive and go out. Let me put it in colors, then you will understand exactly what I mean. If you see the colors here, yes?
Not yet, but I was going to ask you, you say physicality, emotions, and soul. Are you using the emotions as the transitional matters? There we see the color now.
Yes. And I will put the soul in red. And I will put physicality and black. Okay, are we agree until now?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. Now, the soul emit in its level. if we go to the strength, physicality is 1. Emotion is a higher 2. Soul, in order of magnitude, it's 10. Because it is the highest from the physicality and it's the highest from the emotion. If I do it here in the level of the man, I will see that both of them, the physicality and the emotion, created highest in the soul level. And one will take the highest of emotion, and one will take the highest of physicality. Although there is emotion in it. Okay, so why we still eating? Anyone can answer this question? Why we still eating? If we know that the energy which is inside us, it's in order of magnitude 10. So why we still eating?
To keep the point of physics of reference with Earth.
It is depend in our understanding. We give physicality, give from the highest, give from the highest. And the emotion also give from the highest. They created the soul. So when the soul gives, why until now the physicality didn't receive in this color, and the emotion didn't receive in this color? Although the physicality itself, it have the red color in it, and the emotion itself had the red color in it. So what is the problem? And let me tell you why we are eating. Because these two, the physicality and the emotion, because they give, they need to receive. But unfortunately, they are receiving in these colors. So they do not find it from this guy here. So where they go? They go to the living beings, the other creatures, which is have physicality, soul, and it have emotion, and it have physicality. Trying because they give, physicality give, and the emotion give, but they didn't receive because the red one is higher. So where they go? They go to this entity to take what they think level of physicality and the level of the emotion which they give, trying to get the source, the soul. But they didn't understand. They didn't understand. They take. And when they take, they need to give back to this entity 4 times. So from where they take it? From where they take it? They take it from their own soul to process the giving to this entity, which is in order of magnitude, it's in the same level of physicality and the emotion. So what is the problem? Is this guy here, it's high and ego, he cannot be in this level to give, or in this level to give, or these bodies need to change the black in receiving to the red to receive from the soul level. You know, this is a magra. And I hoped John Blevin was here. He will understand very good what was wrong when he worked with his magraphs. And we saw, if you see the workshops where the energy flow everywhere, but they do not manifest a matter state. Although he done everything for this energy to manifest the shield of this entity. It is very simple in reality, because he didn't bring back the field, higher field, to be received by his creation. It is the same process what we are doing. If we know how we take from the energy of the soul, we will stop eating, we will stop drinking, and even in a way we will stop breathing, because here, in order of 10 in order of magnitude, very high source, and how much you take from it, how much it will receive more, because now he's in the weaker position, the higher will give. And understanding, guys, it is very simple. This is the mother and father, the egg and sperm, which has created the soul from the highest. But because in the world and the knowledge of physicality, the same soul created its own prison and its own emotion to interact in the environment. And every time these guys interact, trying to achieve energy level of the soul, but this is already created, so it's interact in its level with the souls. You need to convert this higher source back to the physicality and back to the emotion. You have 2 choices. You make the soul weak enough to give to the physicality and the emotion, or you elevate the physicality and the emotion to receive from a higher source. And it's this source, it's the soul itself. And every one of them have soul in it. We know it from the component of the plasma: matter, principle, and transition. And each of them have access to the other. That means this one itself have emotion and have physicality level. This one also have emotion and physicality level. And the physicality itself have emotion and soul level. So if you understand it, and now you're going to try your best to achieve the level of the soul. And you have it, because you are created out of the soul, out of the field. You are not the first cell which is created out of the matter and the motion and the energy, which is created the high field level of millions of interactions, and then become an entity. You create it out of fields. So try to connect yourself to the fields of yourself. Okay, this is my presentation, and
Beautiful.
I hope someone have any question I would like to answer.
This is a report to the, let's say, when Mr. Kesh saying is needed to look up of your graph. It's reporting to the putting the hands up of the head, or when you are putting the hand plasma ball between the hand, which means if you reverse, let me, if it's possible to annotate, I change the color. If you putting, let's say, not in this order, from weaker to stronger. This is weaker, let me, egg, sorry, sperm, mother, father, and between is creating. She's saying this cover the body, the no body, it's encapsulating the soul. If we reverse, the soul encapsulating the body and the emotion. Reverse the process.
Yeah, how you reverse?
You are learning how to put the hand and extend the field of soul from this position, in this position up to covering.
That means you are working with something non-tangible.
With the fields.
Yes.
When Mr.
This
K
is
is
the first.
saying regarding the, let's say, hand to the prayers, not the prayers to achieve, you have one magra here, let's say, plasma, and the other here. Or you can say the vertical unit or horizontal unit to creating the shell.
It is, Dan, the last sentence of Alex, the knowing, which is important. And every after that, it is a tool for you to know more. The hands, it is very powerful, very, very powerful. And if you know what you are dealing with, even if you achieve what you achieve, it is only a tool for this physicality to go one step higher. not to the matter state, not eating and drinking, not touching, not seeing, not hearing, because both of them, physicality and the emotion, they work in the physical matter. But when you go and you put your hands in front of you or in the level of your eyes or above your head, it is only that you open a door working with the language, which is the soul knows. And this is the field. And once you work with the fields and you progress in it, you go higher. Now you attach the emotion to the fields. The first step is the physicality. Once you achieve it, you go to the emotion. And emotion with the fields which you are creating, then you go to the emotion of the emotion. And then, voila, you are there. To achieve this red point out of this center point, out, you need to call. As Mr. Kass said, ask. That means you create a need. For this fields, which is higher, to give. When it's giving, that means it go back to the source. Okay. I hope you finished your copy, Alex. Any question, by the way?
Yes. Now, isn't the soul a total giver? Like Li Fang? It gives. That's basically what it knows how to do. And I thought the thinking or the understanding was to feed the soul, and in turn, the soul will feed the physicality.
Okay. Do you remember I brought terminology, a give or a donate? What is the difference between them?
No, I don't remember that
With
specifically.
expectation, when with receiving and without receiving, without expectation.
For us to really go on this path, we need to take this step. Giving unconditionally, this is not easy. Really not easy, because it is a learning process. So when we give, we know we'll receive. So we are waiting for receiving. That means we are already failed. But donate, we know what is donation. When you donate, you are 100% sure that you will not receive anything from donation. So if, if we put this understanding to our physicality, to our soul of physicality and the emotion and the soul of the emotion, that what they done, the father and the mother, and created the soul, it is not giving, it is donation. Then we stop pursuing to receive. It is a huge difference, really, in the beginning. This is the step for you to, to go higher and understand what is unconditional giving by involved in donation. When you donate, you are sure 100% that you will not receive. But if you give, if wherever you go, even here in the teaching of Mr. Cash, he's telling you, when you give, you will receive. But if you are waiting for receiving, you will not, because what you're gonna receive, it is in the soul level. So how are you gonna see it? It's higher. How are you going to see it? Or you want it to be weak enough to be tangible and you receive it by physicality or the emotion. Or someone tell you, oh, thank you, you are very beautiful, you are very knowledgeable, you are a doctor, you are a professor, you are, oh, wow, so many names. And the ego will jump out of the chair. So what do you think? It is you. It is not anyone else. If you are very, very progress in giving, and you know how you give without return back, unconditional giving, yeah, that is more beautiful. You are 10 steps ahead. But if you don't know, just to proceed with donation. Whatever you do, it's donation. The smile you give, donation. The whatever. And remember, we are here to serve, not to be served. It is not physicality. Serve the soul. This is a lot of knowledge seekers really, really, they didn't have access to it. They think serving the physicality and the emotion. No. Serving the soul and the higher source.
And the reason I'm saying if the soul had the energy, and if you asked, I think it would feed the physicality. But when we got into this crisis, Mr. Kesh said we would all succumb to this because our knowledge is too low, our soul is too weak, and our soul of physicality is even weaker. So we have to find ways to elevate the soul.
How? You know how? It is very easy. The soul is always giver, is always shining.
Yes.
For whom asking. Look, when I ask you something and you give, that is not that you lose. In the opposite, if I ask you something and you give, you will receive 4, 5 more. So if you take from the soul will not be shortage of, but you need to take. You need to create the common denominator, and you are already you done it already. You know, you came from this process. You need the language. You need the tool, which is the soul, work with and speak in. You are not short of, believe me. It is only knowing. And when you know, you open the door, finish. The soul gives all the time, but for whom asking? There is entities, there is solar systems, there is universes, there is universes, which is asking for this give and take. And the soul is knowledgeable enough to work with them. But we, as physicality and emotion, we don't know how to take from the soul. Absolutely, we don't know. Although we are created through the soul, but we lost the connection.
Now is the question, is anyone done this yet?
I think not. We are in a learning process. If one, you know, Mr. Cass said, I need one. I need one of all this humanity, all this universe to achieve it. And then all of you, it will open to you. You know, this is the same question I ask so many times, Mr. Cash, also the knowledge seekers. He said, you know, don't worry. It will shine to you. It will open for all of you. If only one soul open this door, it will be opened for all the humanity, because we are all connected by this amino acid, what Alex explained to us. We are already connected. Our telephones, our devices, everything is connected. So if one achieve elevation, all of us will achieve that. But who is ready to accept? And I think a little bit one step higher than the others is the knowledge seekers, because they are working with something not tangible. So they are already crazy. So they are already higher than the others.
So if no one achieved it, that must mean the soul is weak.
No,
But what I'm thinking here,
weak in receiving, but it's not weak in the strength.
okay. What I'm thinking here is if someone has a condition in their physicality, well, they're not so much worried about the food and dealing with that. But let's say, and Mr. Kesh calls these systems, the horizontal system, a soul elevation unit. So when that soul receives those
Soul of
conditions,
physicality.
no, the soul of the man.
Soul of physicality.
Okay.
The problem, my dear Mark, the problem, it is with the soul of physicality and the soul of the emotion, not with the soul of the man. The soul of the man is already created these two. It is for the two to elevate themselves to be in that position.
Yeah, I'm seeing it a little differently. That once the soul is elevated, it'll take care of the physicality and it'll take care of the soul of the man.
Yeah, which one?
That
Okay.
soul needs
Okay.
to be elevated.
Okay.
Not a point of contention. We're just
No. It is okay. Let me draw it for you that we all understand it. It's not just talk. It's better to draw it, then all of us here will understand about what we are speaking. Look, when we say the component of the plasma, yes, you know it, I know it, Alex know it, everyone here know it. Principle, the soul, transition, emotion, matter, and this is physicality. Do you have something against that? Mark?
No, that's matter. We have the principal matters, we have the transitional matters, and then we have the matter matters.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Cash, make it like this. What that mean? This one, matter state, access to the transition, and the matter state, access to the soul. So the matter itself have matter, transition, principle, yes? And the transition itself have access to the matter and have access to the principle. That means the transition have a soul and emotion and physicality. It's the same. And the principle have entrance to the matter and have entrance to the transition. So the soul itself have a soul and have an emotion and have physicality. And everyone in its level, you know, every one of them in its level. So which one? This one already created the whole here, F1. That means it created the whole creation, the principle. So the principle have already created this. It is us, the matter state, the physicality, and the emotion together to elevate to be in this position of the principle, to receive from the principle. If Kai told you, he was for nearly 46 hours in the road and all this tiredness. And when he went in, he continued until 1 o'clock. And you know, because I am sure, because I was there, the same thing. The same thing. I always in that time, from the morning until also 1 o'clock in the night. Nothing. I didn't really, I didn't need anything. I didn't need to sleep. I didn't need to rest. I didn't need to even the food. And if who was with us?
Dean and Gunther?
And Gunther, Dean was with Kai. Andreas, I think, was with us. I didn't eat. I was talking, and all of them eat, but I didn't. That was lunch, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. But I didn't eat really, because I was full of energy.
So
Why?
who absorbed that, the physicality directly, or did the soul get elevated and decided to feed?
Which one? Which one? Okay.
I'm asking you.
Yes, yeah, I'm telling you, which one? The soul of physicality, which is received, or the soul of the transition, the emotion. So we get a higher source. Call it whatever you call it. We received higher dose of energy from the place. Is it our emotion, which is see this progress and all what we, for a long tiredness and learning and teaching and all of these years, we saw something tangible, which can serve the others. Maybe this is as Mr. Kass said. Maybe it is only your emotion which received that satisfied all this, what all the knowledge seeker has done, and see it's tangible. Now it is progress. Now we see that all of them, humanity will be benefit. Maybe this is the energy which I am looking for, or
So
other
the
one
soul,
looking for.
so the soul of physicality either received directly from the environment or from the soul directly, or maybe a combination. The other question
Yes.
I had, when
The soul, you call it a soul. Look, you call it a soul. The soul of the place, of lanes, let's say, of everything there, it is only a field. It's so simple, very, very simple. It's a field. So why I make it so difficult? Why do you say it's a soul? It's a field. No, it's a soul. So what is the difference? Soul or a field? What is the difference? It's no different. A lot of time, Mr. Kass said, giving, north side, alkaline, exit. It's the same word for different languages, and you make it very complicated for yourself. Entry, acidic, negative, south. It's the same language. It's one. So why not? The soul and the field is one. No, it can't be. The soul is very, very powerful, and as holy what? It's a field. No, it's a field. No more, no less.
but there is a difference between the soul of physicality and the soul of the man, yes?
Of course, but what is the difference? What is the difference between 59 and 60? What is the difference between copper and zinc? both of them created from the same field, but due to the position, this one you call copper and this one you call zinc, and both of them create your CO2 and create everything. Look what Alex brought, the last picture, cup of universe. Look at it. What you see in the middle, nano-coated copper, nano-coated zinc. Create what? Create a soul. No, create a field. No, create a soul. No, create a field. Okay. Choose what you like and go with it.
I want to say something now.
No? Okay, go ahead.
Recently I'm eating less, but I didn't stop eating. And I don't know, I do meditate. It's not meditate, like I stay empty thought in the night time before going to bed. So recently I'm seeing I can't eat too much. I don't know, I'm getting older or something, what is happening inside me, but I'm eating less. And something I feel, matter, antimatter, and dark matter. Between not matter or antimatter, I'm talking about inside dark matter. There is
Why you make it so complicated? Why dark matter?
Let her try to express herself, please.
Tell it emotion. Call it emotion. Why you call it dark matter?
I'm not talking about emotion. I'm talking about feelings. It is higher than that. If you feel your feelings, then you don't need to eat. And we are trying to do that. Emotion is expecting something. And feelings is totally empty, totally feel, 0 point. I understand that.
Okay, so progress from your understanding. You know, one time Mr. Kass said, this knowledge like Rome, it have 12 doors to enter it.
Yes.
But the beauty, a lot of them, they enter, but they do not really knows that there is 11 door yet with this door, which way they enter in. So it's better to know all these 12 doors, they are exist. So you can exist and you can enter from any door you like.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm touching something and I don't know I can explain, but I'm touching something.
I think if you simplify, just take the simplicity of it, I think you can explain it to the others.
Yeah. Still I'm on the way, but I'm trying.
Yes, that's good.
Now, go ahead, Selena.
Yeah. I don't know I can explain anything, but I stayed in the nighttime, like hour to hour in the empty thought, and I feel I am totally empty, and I feel energetic after that. And the morning time, whole day. And if I use my emotion, then I feel hungry, and then I feel I need something. But if I stay that mode, totally fulfilled, then no hunger, nothing, is happiness, different kinds of feelings. So I don't know, maybe that is the way. maybe other way too. That is my way.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we go for the food, I think, is because we want fast energy. We
Right.
want energy released quickly. Now, if we look at this plasma and we have the principal matter, transitional matter, and the matter matters, there's no physicality in this plasma, is there, Joel? I don't think. There's only the fields of its ability to convert itself into matter. That's why we call it matter matters with an S. Principal matters and transitional matters. Those are fields. But there's no physicality here. There's the ability to convert into physicality. We have matter matters.
What Mr. Cash once said, there is a matter state in each level, but it's not necessary you can see it. In its level, it have a matter state, but it's not necessary that you can see it or feel it or hear it or, you know, work with it, because it's a higher.
Higher
Only
than matter.
only when it is coming in your environment, you know, it is the environment. Celine, even if you don't eat for a month and 2 and 3, you cannot change unless you change the environment. Mr. Khan said, in the space, with your knowledge, you know, now you know it, you can change. So you are already started the change. In the space, this will be very rapid changing because you already have the basic of changing. So you do not need the stomach, you do not need the intestine, you do not need a lot of things. So the change will be rapid if you go with the physicality and you choose this physicality to be your appearance. But here you need a converter to convert this source of energy to the energy of the physicality and the emotion. Okay, take over, Alex. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Joel.
Is there anyone here for the first time that'd like to tell us their name and where they're from? I see a few guests in the list. Some of them I recognize and some I don't. We're just asking how you found us, and just state your name and where you're from, if you don't mind. Or if you're not new, then fine. Oh, I see a microphone.
Hello.
Hello, Claudia.
Yes, my name is Claudia. I'm from Brazil.
Ah, you found us through the Brazil teachings. Very beautiful.
Yes, yes.
They're expanding their fields. Yes, very strongly.
Yeah.
I had only joined at the last 45 minutes on Friday. I only saw the little bird and their work with the bird. And that was a very touching story. I don't know if Raphael wants to, if you're still here, you want to add anything about that, Raphael. I didn't see the initial part, but I did see when they found the bird on the ground and they sort of revived him, put him back into the nest, made a cup, but it was all good in the even though the bird did transition, it was all good and it was all meant to happen that way. So that was a very beautiful and touching story. And thank you, Claudia, for letting us know.
Thank you too.